Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Rimshots, your show brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. And I don't know if this gentleman's comfortable with me saying legend. He doesn't come across as anybody that maybe likes the term, but I'm going to call him the legend, the one and only Mr. Ric Browde, producer, author. I heard dog rescuer in there too. You wear many hats, my friend.
Well, thanks.
So, for starters, what have you been up to? I mean, everything that I read, it just seems like you're kind of doing your own thing, and you're not, you're just kind of doing whatever comes your way. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, right now I run a charity that flies pets from disaster areas and overcrowded shelters to shelters where there's empty kennel space. And we've, in the last 10 years, saved over 74,000 pets, landed in all 50 US states, 8 provinces of Canada, including yours, flown to
Oh,
Halifax.
incredible.
And we've gone to 18 countries.
So have you been to Halifax before?
I have been to your airport way too many times.
Oh, well, there you go. If you ever get back here again, I owe you a beer or a donair or something. If you've been up here, you know exactly what I'm talking about by that. That must be that organization that you have. I mean, a lot of volunteers, I would take it.
Believe it or not, it's Wings of Rescue. It's the name of our charity, and there are only really 4 people, but we use the volunteers from the sending and receiving shelters to do everything. We have we have probably 3 or 4 pilots that work with us, and the rest is just fly them and get them new homes.
I saw some pretty cool pictures of you and your crew, loading dogs onto planes and animals onto planes and things like that. Is it a situation? How do you find out, when these animals are in need? Are you tipped off, or do you have a network of people that handle that?
We get a lot of requests from all around North America. In fact, pretty much all around the world, but we can't really service the people in Europe and Asia. But we have a network of shelters that we work with. I mean, right now it's a very bleak situation to be a pet in North America because there's a shortage of veterinarians. We went 2 years without having anesthesia drugs during the COVID pandemic. So there was a huge animal population explosion, and now they're killing more pets than they ever have in this century. And it's really dire.
I have a cousin who actually lives out the San Francisco area. She's from Nova Scotia, but she has an animal rescue branch out there, and I've had her on my show, and by and large, she gets by an awful lot with fundraisers and donations and volunteers and that type of thing. It's similar to for you.
Yeah, we're sort of on the Blanche Dubois theory of the kindness of strangers, people who donate. I mean, we have about a $3 or $4 million a year budget to do what we're doing. And we also deliver disaster relief to disaster victims, both veterinary and humanitarian. When we go into a disaster area, we don't want to go in with an empty plane. We bring down vitally needed supplies. And we also do a lot of spay and neuter, providing free spay and neuters to low-income families, pets.
And people would know that type of work, it is not, I mean, it's like healthcare. It's not cheap. And people, expect to get paid because they work hard to become vets and animal doctors. So I mean, that's obviously, people need to know that when you're doing your work.
Well, it's not only that, but we're now suffering from a really huge crisis in North America that these venture capitalist firms have bought out all the, large percentage, I would say over 75% of the veterinary clinics, and they've jacked up their prices by probably 3 or 4 times. And that is really making pet ownership very expensive for people. A lot of people who can't really afford it. And that's leading to more turn-ins and more homeless pets. And it's a pretty bleak and dire situation here.
And we're going to put up some information, and certainly at the end of the interview, we'll get you to tell my viewers where they can find out more about that and what have you. I mentioned author, and I haven't read this book yet, but I'm very intrigued. While I'm Dead, Feed the Dog.
Yeah, that's a book I wrote a few years back. It was Gang Raped into the Movie, starring Selena Gomez. They changed the title, they changed the plot. No, I'm listed as an executive producer, but I can't recognize it. In fact, I never even saw the movie. I saw the script. I was like going, fuck, I don't want to be involved with this shit. So she's a billionaire and I'm not. Yeah, I wrote that. I've just written a sequel that's going to come out next year to that book called Son of God, the sequel. And I also wrote a book about my experiences when I masqueraded as a phone psychic back in the Miss Cleo days, which probably didn't come up to Canada that much, but I got a job as a phone psychic, which was a very interesting thing.
Well, I would say, yeah, because up in Canada, that type of thing, there used to be a gentleman from, he actually, I think, was I want to say he was the founder of the Magic Museum in Hollywood, Ravine. He used to come up here and tour Atlantic Canada, and he used to do, sleight of hand and hypnotism and all this stuff. People just used to love it. He'd have a good run up here. So that's interesting. So, what was I guess the idea for writing this book? Was it you had something you had to get off your chest? You had all this information that you were compiling over the years. You just felt you had to get it out there.
No, actually, what happened was one of my dogs broke his leg, and I had to be on the floor. I had to keep him on the floor, and still, and this is back in the days where you didn't have cell phones and things like that so much. So I sat down with and was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to sit on the floor. I canceled the album I was going to do, and I postponed it because I was going to spend 8 weeks on keeping this dog quiet, which was a task in and of itself. So I had a laptop computer and I was just started fucking around with it. And then my wife would come home and like go, what did you do all day? And I go, well, I did this. And she go, that's pretty funny. Why don't you do more? And I kept doing more and more. And all of a sudden what I knew, I had a book and then was fortunate enough to get published by HarperCollins and a couple of others. And then, had a bunch of movie producers seeking out the rights and then was stupid enough to make the deal that I did make with the person that I did. And lo and behold, it got gang raped into the movie and that's it.
Well, for one of those things that yeah, I think I'll try it and see what happens. And it gets published. I mean, it's one of those stories where people work their arses off to get published. And, for you to kind of have it happen kind of matter of factly, I think it's kind of a neat story.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anybody in the publishing world whatsoever, but what it used to do was like people like asked me what I was up to, and I go, well, they usually expected a demo tape back in the day when they had cassettes, and like they could go home and then, on the way the next time they see me, they could just skip through it or be on the phone while they would do it. But that doesn't work with books. So I hand them this book and I go, what the fuck am I gonna do with that? And then they'd be like coming over to my house and like, oh, I better skim it or something like that. But a couple of them really liked it. And that led, to the whole thing where actually a record company, Polygram Records, wanted to release it as a book. They made me record an album to go with it. And then that division folded right before the book came out. So then somebody else took it up and it's just sort of mutated, had a little charmed life because everything, I never had an agent, never had a lawyer, never had an editor other than my wife. And, they never changed a word. And, it's a pretty funny book.
That's incredible, especially in this day and age where it seems like everybody in this business kind of wants to change everything and have a hand in putting their fingerprint on something, and you're able to just kind of do it on your own and have it be accepted is pretty cool.
Well, I had the advantage of the title While I'm Dead, Feed the Dog. Suicide note. My mother left one of 18 taped to the garage door when she tried it. So it was a good laugh.
So I want to get on the music thing because as I was doing the background for this, and I promised I wasn't going to hit the one that you're tired of talking about, but I noticed how many albums that you had a hand in that were actually. I'm a musician myself. I'm a drummer, and were part of my life and my learning. Ted Nugent, Bastard Pussycat, Joan Jett.
Mhm.
Uh, and then the decline of the Western civilization. That I've probably watched that movie as much as I've watched The Sopranos. I'm a huge fan of that. I've come to know some people in it quite well. Um, do you Herman Rarebell? I mean, another huge one. Do you miss that side of the things, the business? I mean, you've done a lot. You started out as an associate, then an assistant, and then kind of became a producer. Do you miss that side of things at all?
Well, I did an album this year, actually. The first album I've done in quite a while, with a band called the Midnight Devils from Nebraska. And the lead single's out, and there's actually a song I wrote about 25 years ago.
Oh, nice.
I was a songwriter for, primarily, and then I was in a band, an ill-fated band. And, just things happened. But, I didn't want to go through life having only done one thing in my life. That's pretty fucking boring, if you ask me. I mean, you only get one life. You're gonna just, I make bread. That's what I do. Every day I'm going to the bread factory. So I decided that, I wasn't going to just do one thing in my life. Life's too interesting, too many opportunities. So I learned how to be, went to Thailand, learned how to be an elephant trainer. Did learned Thai. I went over to Italy, did some albums over there, but learned Italian, went to Germany, learned German, did some albums, just explored things and just life's so fascinating. You wanna do some things. I don't want to just sit in a studio all my life listening to somebody trying to tune the fucking guitar.
Fair enough. Well, and I mean, your recorded resume actually speaks to that because I mean, if you're going up and down it, there's all kinds of, it's. I read one thing where they said you had a hand in, in the glam movement in LA, but as you look at what you're doing, it's like, you're sort of all over the map. I mean, you're not seeing any jazz or anything in there, but I mean, you're seeing all these different genres where you can kind of tell, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to be pigeonholed. Is that a fair statement, Rick?
It's kind of weird because, and you can mention, I did do the Poison album, the first Poison album. We can say that, but we'll just won't talk about it much. But
Yeah.
the albums, it's really funny. You get typecast in the music business, and the irony of my musical career is that the type of music that I'm known for, if I wouldn't use the word famous, the type, that sold the most is a type of music that I would never in a million years listen to myself.
Interesting.
I grew up on R&B and gospel, black gospel music from, Gospelaires from Dayton, Ohio, were my favorite band of all time. I mean, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, Marianne Williams, people who could actually sing, Otis Redding, Staxable, Motown. That was my jam, so to speak. So that was what I was listening to all the time, but I had success with glam. So people are like, hey, we've got a bunch of junkies over here with polka dotted shirts and tattoos. Will you come produce them? And, because the other factor was I never did drugs and I never drank. And so, I was totally straight. So they would stick me with every junkie they could find. And, and it's not to say that I didn't enjoy the records, some of the records that I made, some that I
Right.
did, but I can honestly say I've only done 4 albums maybe that I'm proud of. The album I did with the Dogs to More, who were one of my favorite bands of all time, the only band that I actually ever asked to produce, was just a shitload of fun. And then I did 2 albums with a group called The Flies on Fire, who they weren't successful, but they were amazing records. They went out with one of your Canadian artists, Tragically Hip, on
Yep.
tour, did very well in Canada. But and then I did an album in Italy where they let me write all the songs, which I kind of liked. But I just, I don't need to hear any rock and roll. I don't. I mean, when it comes on the radio, my wife and I always have these fights for the radio dial because I'm like going, I don't want to hear this shit. Let's turn on the comedy channel. And she's like, let's play Circuits of Power and AC/DC and Motley Crue. And, so, my wife would like the records I did far more than I did.
Would you be a producer that once it's done, you kind of never revisit it again? Because I mean, I know I'll do tracks with somebody, and I once I hear it, it's like I'm over that, and I'm on to the next one. Would you be that guy?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the only albums I listen to at all are the Flies on Fire and the Dogs to More. and a band from Italy called Arm Venus. Those are the only albums I'll ever put on. But you know, every now and then I'll walk into the place and I'll hear a song. And this is really familiar. And I'm like, oh shit, it's one of mine. And you know, it's like, yeah, I mean, I take no joy in that other than the paycheck that comes with it.
Well, there's that, absolutely. Because I mean, obviously, people need to know, especially in the music business these days, how hard it is to get paid. I mean, and so the fact that you have all those albums on the wall, and I'm going to guess you're still seeing income from that is significant because a lot of people don't get.
It's funny because, you know, like Joan Jett stiffed me, you know, and she stiffed Desmond Child as well. And, you know, we did the only album that she, you know, that sold of hers in the last 40 years. And since I love rock and roll, and you know, we never got paid.
Wow.
So we got our publishing, but that's it. You know, so it's just, you know, the music business is pretty sleazy. You know, God doesn't strike them down, basically as a written apology to Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, it's just like, you know, it's a pretty sleazy business, but at the same time, it was a heck of a lot of fun.
Fair enough. I mentioned to you when I reached out to you, I've had a couple of high level producers on, and I believe one of them you probably work with. And there seems to be this trend, and I don't know what it is or why it is, but somebody that's had been a successful producer is swiped at by an artist that they work with from the past, and you don't seem to have that. I haven't found much.
People, you know, some of the bands did hate me, Poison hated me. But you know, it doesn't matter because, you know, I gave my best to them, to
Yeah,
all the people who did. And at the end of the day, they got a record. And, you know, some albums were done on first Poison album was done on a $23,000 budget, including everything, which
that's
was
incredible. That's incredible.
pretty amazing, you know. And the Faster Pussycat deal was because I had had the success with Poison. The A&R guy wanted to give him a demo deal, and he was going to go, "I'll give you $30,000 in demos." I go, $30,000, I'll build a fucking record. So we agreed on him giving me 50,000. Then he wanted to drop the band. They hated the record. They, you know, they came the first day we were in the studio and wanted to drop the band, but they'd already given me the deal was they would give me 50 grand of what I didn't spend, I got to keep. And they wanted to drop it. Then even as a record was climbing up the charts, the A&R guy was being called by the record company president. "You dropped Faster Pussycat?" "Yeah." He's like, "No, aren't you glad they broke into the charts in '88?" He's like going, "Yo, fire them." And then, you know, 2 weeks later, "Well, they're at 55. You didn't fire drop them?" You know, the guy ultimately got fired for not dropping a successful band. And its record sold it sold at least 1 million copies that I've been paid for, and it's never been certified gold. It's kind of weird.
Well, it is, and I've talked to other people in the business that they seem to think that maybe that's a ploy to not pay people what they deserve to be paid and fudge the numbers. Would that be an accurate statement?
You know, yeah, I mean, you don't get paid on a lot. I mean, you know, it goes back with the old record formulas. You know, when you got a record contract, they used to say, "We'll pay you on 90% of the records you sold." Because that was dealing back in the days of shellac records, which would break on shippage. But, you know, when most of the things were done on CD, there were no returns, you know, for defective product, or very few. So, you know, there was a lot of budging. I don't think a lot of it, you know, especially back in the days when computers weren't prevalent, wasn't intentional. I mean, some of it was, I'm sure. You know, the mafia was very much involved in the music business, but I think a lot of it was just pure, you know, you're counting like, you know, this is Poison, this is good, this is that, this is where was I at? It's 33, you know, and I'm sure a lot of it was just poor intention. Usually what happens when you go in and audit a record company, they'll immediately settle with you because they just don't want to go for the thing of the audit, and they'll just like, "What do you think it is?" And your lawyer says this, another lawyer, they say that, and then you meet and, you know, God only knows.
I have one more music question to ask you, and then there's something that I want to ask you beyond that, and then I'll be respectful of your time. But we didn't talk about what you said you didn't want to talk about because it's been done to death. But I want to make a statement. Um, in that, regardless of what anybody thinks about that particular album, or maybe what your memory is, it was an album that I think today still stands up. It's an album that I think, and you know, might not agree, but it did set that band on a course. There's no question.
It did, but it was a triumph of image over substance. You know, we were very fortunate in the Capitol Records fired their entire A&R staff. And that meant they only had 2 records to work during that time. They had just bought Enigma and they had Crowded Files and Poison. And that was all they were going to have in their pipeline for a year. So, you know, we were the very fortunate of that. And to the band's credit, as much as I don't like them on a personal level, they worked their asses off. They did a fucking amazing job. Good on them. You know, they made themselves. You know, that was in the days when MTV, you know, actually existed to play music videos. They did very good videos. They also knew how to manipulate the phones really well. And so they caused their own success. It's all on them. The record wasn't any good. I mean, people like it because, you know, you listen to any song and you go, I've heard it 500,000 times. I like this song now because it's ingrained in you. And that's what happened with Poison. I mean, it happens, you know, I love the Venga Boys now. You know, back from, what's it, 20 years ago, we liked to party, but the Venga buses come, because in Thailand where I was learning all this stuff, they only had 1 record in the entire country that year, I think, and that's all I heard. It's just like, oh, you know, it wasn't because it was brilliant. It was just because I heard it a million times. It was engraved in my brain.
Well, it's a good point because I remember being at a hockey tournament and hearing Wang Dang Sweet Food Tang off the live album, and hearing that intro at the beginning, going like, they said that on it, like what, and it stuck with me, and it caused me to go listen to the rest of the album and fall in love
There's
with
a
it.
funny story with that because when we did the live album, Double Live Gonzo, the record company did not want those rap songs. And I was like, going, that's 99% of what the album is. I mean, Nugent was amazing at that. I mean, he may be a horrible human being. Well, he is a horrible human being, but he was great at rapping. And, you know, so when they put out the radio version, the radio version of that album, they took out the raps entirely. And I remember, you know, you probably saw it, you know, what was it, the Voyagers games or something like that, or, you know, you know, I'm a huge hockey fan, you know, and
Oh, I was
so,
going to ask you, so you know about the Nova Scotia Voyageurs, so that's interesting.
oh, yeah, and then how you know about the Mooseheads and I know about the Citadels and all that other, you know.
So, well, so I tell you what, a good friend of mine is a local sportscaster. He works on TSN as well, and he started a minor midget hockey team up here, and he called it the Dartmouth Voyageurs after because his dad used to be one of the reporters for the team.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
cool. No, I'm a huge ice hockey fan, so it's the only sport I've ever followed. I wanted to be an ice hockey player. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I wasn't good enough.
Well, I think it's funny. You always think musicians want to be hockey players, and hockey players want to be musicians. It never fails. Um,
Shorzy is the best TV program ever.
are the Blues your team?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, they obviously you know they had a good run. How do you think they're going to do this year?
I think they're gonna suck.
Yeah, it could be a rebuild.
I'll watch every game anyway. But I mean, you know, they've got some really good young forwards. They don't have much in the way of defense. Defense sucks. They've got really good goaltending, but I think Bannister's a decent coach. You know, I think this year is going to be the year of the National Predators.
You know what? That's a good point. I mean, their day's got to come sometime because they've been building for a long time. So it's be interesting to see. Look, I want to thank you for doing this. You were super gracious and get back to me right away, and it was super nice to meet you. Thank you for being having a hand in creating an awful lot of stuff that helped me learn my musical chops as I was growing up. And all the best to you, my friend.
Good luck. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick. Have a great night.